Okay. Hi guys. Please write in the chat whether I am audible as well as visible. So in today's video, we are going to look at React hooks. And we will be specifically discussing about one particular kind of hook, that is the useState hook. So I would like to mention one thing over here, that is this is the most frequently and the most popular hook that is used in functional components in React. So these hooks are used inside functional components to achieve a certain purpose. So in today's discussion, we will be considering useState hook, which is very important and very much popular. So this hook is basically implemented inside functional components to achieve a certain purpose. So what is the purpose? Let's understand it. So the purpose is nothing but to set or update our state variables. So we will be updating or setting our state variables using this useState hook, and we will be discussing useState hook in today's video. So this is going to be very much important because whichever project I will be building in future, I will be using this hook extensively. So it's very important, and you all should also have like good knowledge about this hook and how this works. So in today's video, we will be learning the concepts behind it. Along with that, we will be doing hands-on. So we will be implementing this particular hook. Along with that, we will be going through the concepts behind this particular hook. So let's start with the text that is written over here. Hooks are new addition in React 16.8. So before that, we generally used class components and lifecycle methods. To deal with the state variables. So about lifecycle methods, I have already discussed in the last 3 lectures. So I would recommend you all to go through those lectures because those are very much important to understand the flow of a React component or how the component exists. So those 3 videos are very much important. In those 3 videos, I have implemented the class component. Along with that, I have discussed about all the lifecycle methods that are very much important. Now in today's video, from now we will be implementing functional components, okay? Components. Rather than implementing class component. And we will also be observing how we can change states using the hooks. So there are very much popular hooks that we generally use inside functional component to deal with state variables. So similarly, we will be using those hooks and we will be learning those hooks one by one Along with that, we will be implementing in near future each of those hooks in a project. For now, in today's video, we will be discussing only about the useState. Okay, so let's move to the next part. Over here, they let us they let you use state and other React features without writing a class. So what I have just now discussed, that is only written over here. That is, we can use or we can deal with the states using hooks, and we do not need to write class components anymore. We can use the hooks to deal with the states inside functional components. Okay, so I hope that this much is clear to you all. Now let's move to the next part or the next slide. So in this slide, I will be discussing about some of the important React hooks that are there and that as a React developer you should have an idea of. So the first one is the use state. The second one is the use effect. The third one is use context. And the fourth one is use ref. The fifth one is use reducer. Then finally use memo and use callback. So for now in this video we will be excluding all this because we are not going to implement or we are not going to understand this or the concepts behind them in this video. In upcoming videos we will surely target each of them. For now I am going to focus on this particular one, that is the use state. Okay, so let's now discuss about the use state hook. So here is a definition or some text associated to use state. Let's understand what's written over here. So as you can see, we are going to discuss about the use state. It is most important and often used hook. So what is written over here, you should emphasize on that. That is, it is very much important to deal with the states and often used hook. So this hook is the most often used hook. The purpose of this hook is to handle reactive data. That is the data that needs to get changed according to the situation. So it is used to handle those kind of data. Any data that changes in the application is called a state. So a data that changes itself too often inside an application is known as state. And when any of the data changes we are required to do, then we will be using the use state. So using the use state hook, we gain the ability to deal with the state variables. Okay, React re-renders the UI. So whenever there is an updation that we do to the state variable, React will re-render the UI, and then finally with the updated states it will render. So not with the not updated states. So each of the states that are required to get updated would be updated, and finally with those updated states the rendering will be done and we will see certain changes in the UI. Okay, so now rather than discussing more about all these descriptive ideas associated with use state, let's directly jump into the format in which we write or we implement the use state. So over here you can see that this is a array or a list in which the first one is a variable and the second one, that is set count, is a function. And finally here use state is used and a value has been passed to it, that is 0. So what happens over here is this value is used to initialize this particular variable. So the value that I pass over here initializes the variable that has been used over here as the first element in the array. And the second element is just a function. And this function is going to update the variable. So set count is a function which is given the power to change the state variable. So the state variable count can be changed using the set count. Now there are various properties that are associated to this particular idea of useState, and we will be revealing them one by one. So for now, you should know that from the useState function, if I pass a particular value as a argument, what happens is that value is used to initialize the variable over here, and there is a function also as the second element in the array. So this function returns us a particular object whose elements, that are the elements inside this particular like object, are destructured such that one of the element is assigned to count and the other one is assigned this function. So the other one is a function which is assigned to this particular set count. So now count is a variable and set count is the function that we will be using to update our state variable. And whenever we will be updating our state variable, a re-rendering will happen and the UI will change. So this is the basic idea. So first of all, using useState, we can get a variable which is a state variable. Along with that, we can get a function, that is the state updation function. We can get this too just by destructuring it. And the value that we pass over here as an argument is assigned to the variable. Okay, so we've got an idea about how this works. Now let's move to the next slide. So over here, let's see what is written. So you can see that we have just used useState over here. Let's change the color. So you can see that, let's change it to yellow. So you can see that we have used useState over here and we have passed an empty string. So the empty string is used to initialize this particular variable, that is text. And over here, the setState function will be used to update this state variable and to re-render the content that is written within app. And finally, return the updated JSX. Or if the JSX is using any updated value, then it will return that. So over here, you can see that I am using a set text and I'm passing a new string, that is, this is a state to it. So now the text value, which was initially an empty string, is now changed to this is a state. This is a state. Okay. So this is now changed. And whenever the variable text is changed or the content of the variable text gets changed, this re-rendering again happens. And now instead of like showing nothing over here, this particular text like would get displayed. And now this particular app component is exported over here or rendered. Now let's understand what is written over here. Let's change the color again. So you can see that we could not use states outside class component. So we know that outside of the class component, we cannot use the states because we generally declare a state inside the constructor of the class component and generally use it within the class component and generally do a change to the state using this dot set state. I hope that you remember this as we have discussed this concept earlier. For class component, we can update our state variables using this particular function. And however, using React hooks, we can we can change the state variables within the functional components. So to change the state variables within the functional components, we are provided with hooks, and we will be seeing how we can do so. First, we need to import useState from React for that. So we need to write this to import useState from React so that we can use this particular hook. Then within the function component, we define our useState. So now within the function component, we can see, so app is the functional component. Let's remove everything. So you can see that app is the functional component. So this is the functional component within which is app, within which I am using the useState. So we define our useState, which returns two values. So the useState returns two values: a variable for initializing the state. So it will return a variable that will initialize the state. So, and a text and a function for updating the state, which is this one. So the first thing that it returns is a text, and the second one is the function. So the text is the state variable, and this is the function that we can use to make any changes to this particular state variable. So you have got an idea about how we can use useState to generally destructure two important parameters, or a state variable and a state function, state updation function. And we can then regulate or change or update the state variable using this state updation function. So this is a very interesting concept. So I think that you have got an idea about what I am like explaining. Then let's move to the next part. So over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare how we use or we change the state inside a class component and how we can achieve the same inside a functional component. So let's have an understanding of that. So over here, you can see that we have used this syntax to get a state variable and a state updation function. And we have assigned an empty string to the text. Now, using the useState hook, okay? And it has been introduced like useState hook through ES6 destructuring to return two values. So the concept that is used over here to access a state variable and a state updation function from this particular function by passing a initializing value to it is destructuring. So this is the concept. This is a JavaScript concept. Okay. After that, text, which is how we initialize the state. So we initialize the text state in the manner that is text over here, and is equivalent to in function to state equals to this. So what is actually written over here is that inside the constructor in a class component, we generally declare the state and we initialize the state to a particular value. So the first declaration and initialization is preferred always within the constructor. So instead of doing this inside a constructor as we do in class components, we will be writing this particular piece of code to do the same inside functional component. Okay, and basically means we are initializing our state of text to an empty string. Now let's move to the next line. Set text is how we update the state using hooks and is equivalent to this. So now here in this second point, we are talking about this particular state updation function, that is the set text. So this can be used to achieve a certain purpose that we used to achieve in class component using this particular line. So using this line, we generally use to update our state variable, which in this case is text. And here we update the value of our state text to this is a state. Okay. Now finally, in order to use our state, where the syntax would previously have been this. So to use the state variable text, we generally used to write this inside the return to display the JSX, this JSX on our UI. But for now, we will be for functional components, or when we will be using useState hook, we will be simply writing this rather than using this dot state dot text. So this is the comparison that I would like to discuss with you all in this particular video, which is very important to make the concept behind useState hook quite relatable to you all. Now let's move to the next slide. So here, this is the same snippet of code about which I have just discussed with you. Okay. So there is nothing that is differing over here. So now let's move to the next one. Over here, you can see there is a very important concept that has been mentioned. What is that? Let's see. So the functional updater, what does this mean? So you can see over here that the good old set state that we used in class component had it. So this one also used the functional updater, and finally our functional component inside that we also will be doing the same using useState, because useState has it too. So what is this functional updater? We will discuss about it in just few seconds. The functional updater, instead of passing a new value to the setter that we get from useState, we can also pass a function to it. Like instead of passing the value to which I want to update my state variable, we can also pass a function. That is what it means. React will call that function and give us the previous value, okay? So that we can calculate a new result depending on it. So this is one way by which we can implement the useState hook to update our variable. That is the state updation function that we have destructured from the useState hook. We can use it to update our state variable count just by passing to it the updated value. Similarly, instead of writing it in this way, we can also write it in this way, in which we can capture the previous value in previous count, which is an arrow function. You can write it in this way also. Previous count, and to it, I'm going to update the previous count to +1. So I can capture the previous value of count over here, and I can just add 1 to it to get the updated value, and thus the updated value will be used to set the state variable over here, that is count. So instead of writing the updated value over here or passing the updated value, we can also write it in the form of function. In that case, we have to capture the previous count and then update the previous count. So this is what I have implemented over here. So I think that you have got an idea about what is like this particular thing, that is the functional updater. So instead of just passing the variable, we can also pass the function and we can capture the previous value as an argument, and then we can just as a parameter, and then we can just add 1 to it to update the previous value, and that updated value will be used to update the count. Okay, so I think that this is clear to you all. Now let's move to the next part. So over here there is another important concept that I would like to discuss. So you have learned about how you can like destructure the useState to get a state variable and a state updation function, and I can assign this value to the state variable over here. Okay, but we have also seen that we can use the state updation function to update our state values. Over here, on click of a button, you can see that there are two state updation function over here, which are called one after another. So if the value is 0 for now, it should have increased to 1, then to 2. But this doesn't happen because this updation is not what happens instantly. updation is not instant. So for now, when this is being called, the count is still not incremented. It's the previous value only, so 0. And then again it is called just by using 0. So even if we write like one after the other, it will not get updated to 2, rather it will get updated to 1, because in both the cases count will be 0, because the updation in the first case will not occur instantly. Okay, so you've got an idea about this also. That is calling the same setter multiple times. So this is an ambiguity, or this is a problem that we need to fix. So now let's move to the next slide. So over here, we are going to discuss about the update bailout. Let's see what it is. So again, I have assigned a string to this, and I have done a destructuring to get the state variable and the state updation function. Finally, over here, I am updating the state, that is name over here, with the same value which it previously contains. So it already contains this particular string, isn't it? And I am updating it with again with the same value. In that case, no updation happens, and no rendering is also done. Is done. This is very much important. You should note this. Okay. Finally, so we are done with all the slides that we had to discuss with you all regarding the useState hook. I hope that you have got an idea about how this useState hook actually works, why it is so much important. Now let's implement the useState hook to have a better understanding. Okay. So let's move to the VS Code. Let's implement it. Okay. So let's get back to the VS Code now. Come back to VS Code. Let's see some implementation. So it's better to like discuss with you all about the useState hook. I using a counter because that is the most preferred one and the most common one. So let's understand how this can be done. So over here, first I'm going to use a division tag, within which I'm going to use some state variable. Okay. So let's first do the initialization. For that, constant. I have seen that we use a array over here to destructure the value that is returned from useState hook. So over here I will be using counter. Okay, and a function that is set counter. Okay, and I will use useState, and I will assign this a value 0. Okay, now over here I am going to display the counter. So over here, as I am implementing it within a functional component, I do not need to write this dot state dot counter. I can just simply write counter, because we have seen in the slides in one of the points that we generally can access the state variable directly. So over here, counter, then this. Now, obviously, I will be implementing a button to do some changes to the counter. Button on click event, something should happen. So over here on click event, I would like to call a function that is update. And let's write over here click. Okay. Now let's implement the update function over here. Constant update. So over here, I will be using the set counter. And I will do nothing, but I will simply update counter just by adding 1 to it. Okay. So I hope that we are done with the counter. Now let's save it. Let's get back over here. Now if I click, I can see that every time I'm clicking, the counter value increases, like +1, +1, +1, because I am updating my counter using +1 to the previous counter value. Okay, that is clear from here. Now let's write something over here. Again, let's use a set counter. Let's save it. Then just click refresh this again. Now let's click. So you can see that despite I'm clicking on the button, the counter value just increments by 1. Okay, so why this is happening? Because here we were expecting the counter value to get incremented by 2, but in this case it is incrementing by 1. This is because of the fact that whenever the first updation is happening, the counter changes from 0 to 1. Okay, but it doesn't change instantly. So counter is not updated to 1 instantly. It takes some time. So for now it is 0 only. So whenever I'm using this state updation function, as like the updation is not happening instantly, so the counter is 0 again, and when I'm adding 1 to it, it is again 1. So even though we click on the button, and in which like I'm calling this function update, within which I am implementing the state updation functions one after the another, though we are doing this as we are expecting over here that it should get incremented by 2, this will not going to happen. It is going to increment by 1 only. This is due to the reason that the updation over here doesn't happen instantly. So whenever this updation happens, there will be a like re-rendering, okay, of all the content that is within this app function. So it takes some time. So before that, it is being called again. So the initial value that was to the counter is not the value that got increased by 1, but it is the value that is over here only. So in both the cases, counter is having the same value. It is just as simple as that. So this is one thing that I wanted to discuss. Okay. For now, let's remove this one. Also, let's now do one thing. Let's now use the console log over here. And let's write render. Okay. Let's save it. Let's get back to the browser. Let's refresh it. So it is rendered for the first time. Now whenever you click, you will see a render. Then again you will see a render. Then as many times you will be clicking, you will be seeing the render. So you have clicked 5 times. So the render is over here 5 times. This is because of the fact that whatever like you are right, whatever you are doing over here, in each click, you are simply updating your state variable. Okay. So as your state variable is updating and the previous value of counter is not equals to the current value, that is the value of the counter changes with each click. So every time the value changes, it will render the entire content that is implemented inside the functional component. Now, instead of just doing +1, let us just keep it as it is. We are not doing any increment, we're not doing any kind of operation over here. Now let's get back over here. So let's refresh it. Now if you click on the counter, you can see that render is no more locked because no rendering is happening. The content within the functional component is no more rendered because we are not updating our state variable. It is 0 always. So there will be no rendering. If we have updated this or changed this particular value using the state updation function, then rendering would have happened. Now let's update this particular value, okay, without using a state updation function. So for that, let's remove this. Let's use counter plus plus, okay. Let's save it. Now let's get back over here. Let's click. You can see that assignment to constant variable. So there is a problem over here. So I'm explaining it to you. Let's change it to set counter, and let's write over here counter plus 1. Now you can see that the error is gone. Now if you click, there is no error. So why we were getting that error? This is due to the fact that this counter variable is a constant value, and we are trying to update a constant value over here just by doing an increment, isn't it? So we know that we cannot change or mutate the constant value. So in that case we were getting an error. But why then we are not getting an error when we are using this function to update the same value? This is because of the fact that whenever you are using this state updation function provided by the useState, each time you are updating the counter, it is considered as a new constant value rather than the old one. So whenever you are updating, you are creating a new counter rather than the previous one. So if we do not increment in this way, if we do just plus plus, then we will getting an error because we are then not creating a new count. We are updating the old one only, and as we are updating that, we are changing the value associated to that, and as it is declared with constant, it is going to give error. So by now we are clear with what is useState, how to use it, in which cases do we need to use it. If we do not use it, if we simply update, then what error we can get, and all small nuances about this useState hook has been explained to you all. I hope that you enjoyed this live class a lot, and there has been a lot of learning from here. In upcoming videos, we will be coming up with a lot more interesting facts. Till then, stay tuned. Thank you for watching.